Good morning and welcome back to our last week of summer school with our reading lessons. We're going to continue to work with fiction books this week, just like we did last week. Last week we started to talk about the different story elements like characters, setting, beginning, middle, and end. Today we're going to focus on how to recognize the beginning, middle, and end of the text and the different story elements that happen in those different parts of the text. So what I want to teach you today is where the different story elements are in a fiction text. So what we're going to do today is I have another book and it's called Amazing Grace. And we are going to listen to this book today. And as I'm listening, I'm going to be typing over here on this side, and I'm going to be typing in some of the story elements. I'm going to be paying attention to the characters. I'm going to be paying attention to the setting, and I'm going to be paying attention to major events that happen in this story. This book is about a little girl named Grace and something that she does that's pretty amazing. So I'm going to play this story, and I'm going to leave it over here in this smaller version so I can show you how I type things over here at the same time. This would kind of be the same as last week when I was actually reading my book and writing on my Post-its. This would kind of be doing the same thing, just I don't have this book in front of me, so I'm not going to write Post-its and put it on the pages, okay? So let's get started and hear what happens to Grace.
Today's story is Amazing Grace by Mary Hoffman, illustrated by Carolyn Bench. Grace was a girl who loved stories. She didn't mind if they were read to her or told to her or made up in her own head. She didn't care if they were in books or movies or out of Nana's long memory. Grace just loved stories. After she had heard them, and sometimes while they were still going.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there because right off the bat, I'm noticing that I'm being introduced to a couple characters. I'm being introduced to Grace and Nana. So these are my characters. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going.
On, Grace would act them out, and she always gave herself the most exciting part. Grace went into battle as Joan of Arc and wove a wicked web as Anansi the spider. She hid inside the wooden horse at the gates of Troy. She went exploring for lost kingdoms. She sailed the 7 seas with a peg leg and a parrot. She was Hiawatha, sitting by the shining big sea water, and Mowgli in the backyard jungle. Most of all, Grace loved to act out adventure stories and fairy tales. When there was no one else around, Grace played all the parts herself. She set out to seek her fortune, with no companion but her trusty cat, and found a city with streets paved in gold.
Okay, so I'm starting to notice something else about Grace, and that is that Grace liked to act out stories. Okay, if I also think about another story element that we talked about last week, that is the setting. Okay, so I'm noticing that the setting of this story is kind of at Grace's home and kind of outside her home. So I'm just going to put Grace's home. So now I have the setting of the story, and I have the characters, and I have something that has kind of happened or that I've learned about Grace. Okay, so I'm going to keep listening.
Or she was Aladdin, rubbing his magic lamp to make the genie appear. Sometimes she could get Ma and Nana to join in when they weren't too busy. Then she was Dr. Grace, and their lives were in her hands. One day, Grace's teacher said they would do the play, Peter Pan. Grace knew who she wanted to be. When she raised her hand, Raj said, "You can't be Peter. That's a boy's name." But Grace kept her hand up. "You can't be Peter Pan," whispered Natalie. "He isn't black." But Grace kept her hand up. "All right," said the teacher.
So I feel like something important has happened there because I know that Grace really likes to act out plays, and I'm noticing now that they're going to do a play at her school. And so I think that that's really important to recognize as a major event in the story. And that is that Grace wanted to be Peter Pan, but the other kids said she couldn't. One kid said she couldn't because she's a girl, and another kid said that she couldn't because she is black, and Peter Pan isn't black. So I think that that's an important thing to think about and to recognize from this story, and that's a major event kind of that happens to Grace.
Lots of you want to be Peter Pan, so we'll have auditions next week to choose parts. She gave them words to learn. When Grace got home, she seemed sad. "What's the matter?" asked Ma. "Raj said I can't be Peter Pan because I'm a girl." "That just shows what Raj knows," said Ma. "A little girl can be Peter Pan if she wants to." Grace cheered up. Then later she remembered something else. "Natalie says I can't be Peter Pan because I'm black," she said. Ma looked angry. But before she could speak, Nana said, "It seems that Natalie is another one who don't know nothing. You can be anything you want, Grace, if you put your mind to it." On Saturday, Nana told Grace they were going out. In the afternoon, they caught a bus and train into town. Nana took Grace to a grand theater. The sign outside read, "Rosalie Wilkins in Romeo and Juliet," in sparkling lights.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to think that that's another important event from this book, that her Nana is taking her to the ballet. So I'm going to put that down here as well as another event that happened in this book. Nana took Grace to the ballet. I'm feeling like that's an important event because I think that that's going to be important to Grace feeling like she can actually be Peter Pan in the play. So let's listen to find out.
"Are we going to the ballet, Nana?" asked Grace. "We are, honey, but first I want you to look at this picture." Grace looked up and saw a beautiful young ballerina in a tutu. Above the dancer it said, "Stunning New Juliet." "That one is little Rosalie from back home in Trinidad," said Nana. "Her granny and me, we grew up together on the island. She's always asking me do I want tickets to see her Rosalie dance, so this time I said yes." After the ballet, Grace played the part of Juliet, dancing around her room in her imaginary tutu. "I can be anything I want," she thought. On Monday, the class met for auditions to choose who was best for each.
So now I'm noticing that that really was an important event because it really helped change Grace's mind. At first, she was thinking that maybe the other kids were right, that she couldn't be Peter Pan because she was a girl and because she was black. And then after her Nana took her to the ballet, that's really changed what she's thinking and how she feels about herself. So that was a really important event that happened. So I'm glad I wrote that down.
Each part. When it was Grace's turn to be Peter, she knew exactly what to do and all the words to say. She had been Peter Pan all weekend. She took a deep breath and imagined herself flying. When it was time to vote, the class chose Raj to be Captain Hook and Natalie to be Wendy. There was no doubt who would be Peter Pan. Everyone voted for Grace. "You were fantastic," whispered Natalie. The play was a big success, and Grace was an amazing Peter Pan. After it was all over, she said, "I feel as if I could fly all the way home." "You probably could," said Ma. "Yes," said Nana. "If Grace put her mind to it, she can do anything she wants."
Okay, so another thing that I've noticed that happened is that Grace got the part of Peter Pan, didn't she? that part that she really wanted. Grace got the part of Peter Pan. So she ended up getting what she wanted, didn't she? Okay, so now that we're kind of done with the story, and I have all of these notes that I took during the story about the story elements, the characters, the setting. I wrote down some of the major events that happened in this story. Now we're going to think about where did we see these major events? Where were we as the reader introduced to these things? Was it in the beginning, the middle, or the end? Okay, so I'm going to take this first one right here. When we learned about Grace and Nana as the characters, where was that in this story that we learned about them as the characters? Was it in the beginning, middle, or end? Well, I noticed that it was actually in the beginning that we were really first introduced to Grace and Nana, right? So that was the beginning of the story. Let's go down to the setting because that's another story element that we've talked about. And I want to think to myself, when in the story was I introduced to the setting? Well, it was really at the beginning when I was introduced to Grace and Nana, right? Because that's when I kind of started thinking about where the setting took place. Now, the setting did change a little bit as the story went on, and part of the setting was in her classroom. But I'm going to keep it as Grace's home because the majority of the story happened at her home. Okay, so now we have these two story elements where we noticed them. They were at the beginning of the story where we were first kind of introduced to those things. So let's talk now about these were some of the events that happened in the story, right? So in the story, Grace liked to act out stories. She wanted to be Peter Pan, but the other kids said she couldn't. Nana took Grace to the ballet, and Grace got the part of Peter Pan. So let's think for a second. At what point in this story did these events happen? The beginning, middle, or end? So if I look at this first one, Grace likes to act out stories. And I think about when did the story really talk about how she liked to act out stories? Was it in the beginning, the middle, or the end? If I remember correctly, it was really at the beginning of the story. That was when the author was really telling us about Grace and telling us what kind of person she was and some of the things that she liked to do. And that's really where the author was talking about how she likes to act out different stories. Okay. This next event that I wrote down, Grace wanted to be Peter Pan, but the other kids said she couldn't. Was that really in the beginning, middle, or end? Think to yourself real quick. Did that happen at the beginning, middle, or end? So if I think back to the story, I know at the beginning I was introduced to Grace and Nana and the setting and how she likes to act out stories. But this part right here where she wanted to be Peter Pan, that really happened in the middle of the story after she went to school, didn't it? So in the beginning, she was acting out all of these stories, and then she went to school, and then this happened. Okay. So then I'm thinking this next event. So this next event of when Nana took Grace to the ballet, that was also kind of in the middle of the story. It wasn't quite to the end where Nana took Grace to the ballet. It was really in the middle of the story after she came home and said she wanted to be Peter Pan, but the other kids said that she couldn't. Okay, so these were two major events that happened in the middle of the story. This last event really happened at the end of the story, right? Where she got the part of Peter Pan and she was in the play and she did such a great job. So that event really happened at the end, okay? So this is just one example of how I was taking my notes as I was listening to the story. And I was writing down these story elements that we know about. We know that we need to think of characters, setting, and then some of the major events that happen in the story, okay? Some where it talks about character traits and other events that happen in the story that we feel like are important. So for this, I listened to the story and I wrote down all of these things, and then I kind of sorted them into where they happen in the story, the beginning, middle, or end. So you're going to kind of get to do the same thing today. I am going to let you guys pick a book that you want to read. It could be on Epic. It could be a book in your home. Just make sure that it's a fiction book because we are working with fiction right now. We're not working with nonfiction anymore. We're working with fiction. So I'm going to let you pick your book today. I will put a book link on our Padlet if you want to use it. If you're not really sure what book you could use, I will put one link on there, but you do not have to use it. There will be a template on our Seesaw activity that looks just like this, okay, beginning, middle, and end. And I want you to take your notes and fill the chart in with your book, just like I did today with the beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so that's what you're going to do today. You're going to tell me the characters, the setting, and then some major events that happen in your story. And you're going to tell me if those major events happen in the beginning, the middle, or the end. So that's your assignment for today. So again, I will post a link on Padlet. You do not have to use it, but this template will be on your Seesaw activity, so you can fill in some text boxes, put in some text boxes, and type in some of these story elements from your book. So I'm super excited to see what you guys put as the beginning, middle, and end, and the characters from your book. I also love how some of you last week took a photo of the front cover of your book so I could see which book you were working with, and that was fabulous. If you could do that as well for me so I know which book you were reading. And I can't wait to see all of your work, all of your great work with identifying the beginning, middle, and end of your stories.